Good morning. My name is Gwendolyn Pizzaruso, and I decided to do my research on sensory interventions for students with autism spectrum disorders. I chose this topic for a few different reasons. I am a one-to-one ABA paraprofessional, and in my classroom we have 3 students with autism who are nonverbal, and each of my students has different sensory issues. Some of them are tactile. Some students don't like to touch different textures, Play-Doh, silly putty, slime. Some of my students have sensory issues with sound. Loud noises upset them. And other of my students have sensory issues when they sit still. They have a hard time staying seated. They like to jump up and slam themselves into their chairs to get that input from, the bang of the chair. So it was very interesting to see all of the research that was provided for sensory interventions. I started with a little description about what autism spectrum disorders are. I think this can be a controversial topic in the world today, so it was nice to just have a little overview. The National Institute of Mental Health describes autism spectrum disorders as a developmental disorder that affects communication and behavior. These individuals have difficulties with social skills and repetitive behavior. There are a broad range of conditions that fall under autism spectrum disorders that vary in severity. The DSM-5, which has recently been reorganized, describes individuals with autism as having difficulty with communication and interaction with other people, restricted interests and receptive behaviors, and have symptoms that hurt the individual's ability to function properly in school, work, and other areas of life. ASD is typically diagnosed within the first few years of a child's life. There are different signs and symptoms of autism spectrum disorders. As we said previously, individuals with ASD have difficulty with social communication and interaction. These difficulties include inconsistent eye contact, lack of conversational skills, a monotone voice volume, the inability to understand perspective, and a lack of understanding facial expressions. Individuals with ASD have difficulty with restricted interests and repetitive behavior. These behaviors include echolalia, where they repeat what they hear, rocking, flapping, an intense interest in a subject, overly focused interests, being upset about changes to routine, and hypersensitive or hyposensitive reactions to sensory input. These symptoms interfere with their ability to live their daily lives. But individuals with ASD also have very many strengths. They have the ability to learn in great detail. They are excellent in math, science, music, and art. And they are strong visual and auditory learners. There are some different causes and risk factors that occur in ASD. About 1 in 59 children are diagnosed with this disability. About 1 in 37 boys and 1 in 151 girls are diagnosed. Typically, ASD is more prevalent in boys than girls, and currently there is no known cause of autism spectrum disorders. There are risk factors: having older parents, having a sibling who has an autism spectrum disorder, having genetic conditions like Down syndrome or Rett syndrome, and having a low birth weight can contribute to having ASD, but again, there is no known cause. There is research that's being conducted to determine the cause, and this research has proven that vaccines do not cause autism. It's a super controversial topic in social media right now, and it was comforting to read the research that is shown that vaccines do not cause autism. Diagnosis of ASD is done through professional evaluations. It's determined by behavior and development that can occur as early as 2 years old. All children are screened at well-visit checkups by their pediatrician. These well-visit checkups happen at 9, 18, 24, and 30 months. And there are different milestones that children should be hitting at these ages that children with ASD do not experience. Parental concerns and experiences are very important factors in the screening process. Parents are, in the first line of explaining to pediatricians what they're seeing at home and how their child is acting. Children who are deemed at risk will be evaluated by a team of health professionals. These professionals can include a developmental pediatrician, a psychologist, a neuropsychologist, and a speech-language pathologist, and they will assess the child and determine if a diagnosis with ASD is appropriate. Diagnosis can also occur in school-age children. This often occurs as school professionals recognize delays and deficits in the child. The special education team can start the process, but will refer to medical professionals for their expertise as well. And there's also diagnosis in adults, which is difficult because these ASD symptoms can act as other health issues. The treatment for ASD is varied depending on the child. Not all children with autism spectrum disorders are the same. Therefore, the same treatment plans will not work for everyone. They should be based on the individual's specific needs, and typically multiple types of interventions are used as treatments. There are treatments anywhere from dietary therapies, facilitated communication and speech therapy, behavior interventions, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and medication. Parents seem to use treatments based off of personal beliefs as well as scientific research. And one of the interventions that are becoming popular as one type of treatment are sensory interventions. Sensory interventions occur when there are sensory overloads. These sensory overloads can occur in many different areas, some of which are sight, sound, smell, movement, tactile, body awareness. Children with ASD are either overly aware or underly aware of sensory stimuli. These children have difficulty organizing the incoming sensory stimulation, and their responses to these stimuli can be positive or negative. Children with ASD may show signs of avoidance or withdrawal. Sensory interventions are often being used in addition to other interventions, and they are becoming widely used in education and occupational therapy. Sensory intervention is defined as a sensory motor treatment technique that responds to specific sensory integration dysfunctions observed in the individual. They consist of sensory diets, which are sequences of activities that are designed to challenge a student's response to sensory stimuli with a goal to make a successful response. Basically, they provide feedback to address the sensitivities that are specific to each child with ASD. Some of these activities include weighted activities. So for example, a student carrying something heavy across a room. There's tactile exposure, which can include a child touching different textures to get them used to the differences. There's physical activities like jumping jacks and push-ups that give input back to the child. And yoga is also an example of activities that is included. It's important to remember that sensory interventions should not be used as a replacement of core education. And I thought it was very interesting that in my research, I found there is a lack of scientific evidence for the effectiveness of sensory interventions, but it's still a common approach in treatment. The studies that have been done are generally poorly designed and do not measure the behavior directly. There is a call for more research to be completed in the future. A school is a great place for a child to have sensory overload. The school environments are often made up of conflicting stimuli. There's harsh lighting, it's noisy, there's a lot of visuals around the rooms, there's a lot of movement and transitions that occur, and a classroom is filled with distractions. Educational expectations have shifted toward longer periods of time sitting still that require appropriate behavior, good listening skills, and the ability to stay on task and focused. More than 70% of students do not meet the recommended 60-minute minimum of activity on a daily basis, and 44% of elementary schools have reduced their PE and recess time after the passage of No Child Left Behind, which, in my personal opinion, is unacceptable. These expectations are difficult for a typical child. I personally find it hard to sit still for long periods of time. So children with ASD are immediately put at a higher disadvantage. Occupational and physical therapists are using new strategies involving physical activity and movement to assist students with ASD in their educational environment. One of these techniques is something called a movement break. A movement break involves short bursts of activity, often moderate to vigorous in nature, between periods of academic instruction. These movement breaks, when they last about 5 minutes, seem to be the most successful. We are learning that physical activity improves many areas of academics. Cognitive performance, reading and math skills, increased on-task behavior, and improved levels of concentration are all improved by participating in physical activity. The goal of a movement break is student participation in physical activity, with the hope that when the student returns to the classroom, he or she can be focused, on task, and have a good academic performance. These movement breaks help to refocus a student's attention, and it gives the brain a chance to consolidate information, improve impulse control, and have some executive functioning occur. Teachers themselves are self-reporting that movement increases student engagement. They have positive descriptions of student alertness levels increasing, behavior problems lessening, and students having longer attention spans. Movement breaks are even being used as reward for students if they choose so. Again, research is showing that there is a need for continued research on this topic. It's suggesting that there are positive effects on using physical activity, but the results are inconsistent and depend on the student. There's also a call for teacher training regarding movement breaks. Teachers are aware that movement breaks help students excel in their education. They are self-reporting the positives that are occurring in their classroom. However, they're unaware of why this connection between physical activity and education exists, and they are saying that they would like to know more. Sensory hallways have become really popular. News outlets all over the country and social media have sparked the interest of educators everywhere. Sensory hallways are designed to give students, typically those students with a disability, movement breaks focusing on balance, body awareness, spatial awareness, and motor planning. But we should note that children without disabilities also benefit from these sensory hallways. Activities that provide opportunity for crossing at midline, weight bearing, and locomotor skills are essential parts of these sensory hallways. Students should be participating in activities like jumping, hopping, walking along a line, lunging, squatting, planking, and doing push-ups. These are some pictures of the hallway that was created in my current elementary school. It was inspired by my 3 students in my self-contained class. Myself, my lead ABA special education teacher, physical therapist, occupational therapist, and PE teacher have been working on this hallway for the last 1.5 years. It's been our baby. First, students can pop the bubbles in this video. They tiptoe around the starfish. They get to do the swim dance as some of the stations that we've created. To create a sensory hallway, there's some steps that you need to take. There should be collaboration with the physical and occupational therapist. You can include the physical education teacher, as we did in this. It's important to determine the needs of the students who will use the hallway the most, and getting student input on what they feel they need is always helpful. There needs to be a list of the physical activities that should be included. You must plan out the stations, determine the materials needed to create the stations, purchase or create your own materials. There are hundreds of kits that are available from various websites that can be bought. We chose to create our own. We wanted a sensory hallway that was sea life themed, since our mascot is a dolphin. Next, you need to lay your sensory hallway out and make sure that your plan makes sense. After that, you can adhere your materials where they need to go. Open your sensory hallway to students and watch them increase their academic success. It has been incredible watching some of these students who have difficulties ask to go down to the sensory hallway. They go through it 2 or 3 times, and then they're ready and willing to go back to class and finish whatever assignments or activities that they were working on. There's just so much positive reviews for sensory hallways. CBS New York wrote an article with the title, "Sensory Hallways Give Students Innovative, Active Focus Boost." Brandy Chevalier, a principal at Roland School, described sensory hallways as they feel like they can burn some energy. They feel ready to sit down to get to work. They can focus a little bit better. Another principal, Joe Bordeaux, at Griswold Elementary School, says they're not only working with gross motor skills, but bringing in the academic piece as well. And Janine Petito, an occupational therapist at PS13, says many of our students require increased sensory input to help regulate their bodies in order to be ready to participate in their learning and succeed in school. I was really intrigued by this topic, and I'm really excited to share what I've learned with all of you and give you a glimpse into my own school. And all I can say is my students love it, and they are excited about their sensory hallway, and it's been a really, really great experience for our students. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.